Hi Ashley, this is your instructor Jason, and I am here with a video response to your post week 4 discussion 1 on climate change. So I just want to review this with you and give you some thoughts. I mean, there really is quite a lot to say on the subject, and I feel like one little discussion post or discussion forum doesn't really do this whole thing justice. So here I am, I'm looking at your post, and basically you had to cover the IPCC report and some of the things that you talk about, change in sea levels. These are facts that that are really kind of hard to dispute. So what does that mean? The temperature of the ocean is going to change, sea level rise is going to change, but what does that really mean for us? A lot of times these changes are incremental and small, and people have a really hard time understanding the effects. So the first thing, with the change in sea level, obviously it means that in the future, some places are probably going to be underwater, and this is something that I'll bet you've already seen. Um, there are cities along the coast and countries out there in the Pacific and in some other places that have to deal with the very real possibility that they're going to be underwater very soon. So, mitigation is a strategy that can be used by countries that have high carbon footprints, and they can try to reduce their carbon footprint. But what do you do if you're an island in the Pacific or a city along the coast, and the mitigation strategies that you put into place, because that's what you have jurisdiction over, don't cover the rest of the world, who continues to emit carbon and potentially put you out of business, or put you underwater? Well, I mean, in a case like that, you really have to come up with a strategy for adaptation. And what does that mean? Does that mean abandoning certain sections of the coast altogether? Does that mean building levees? Does that mean coming up with new ways to deal with storm surges and things like that? I mean, these are the very real types of policy choices that governments have to make based on the facts, and the facts are the ones that are presented in the IPCC document. And so, looking at what you had to say, I mean, yeah, any policy recommendation that targets mitigation and sustainable development is good, but are developing economies really willing to do that? Because a developing economy is going to try to bring the standard of living up for its people, so that eventually, they're on par with the rest of the world. But if you put sustainable development and climate change mitigation at the forefront of your policies for a place like that, you're going to hamper economic growth. And if you hamper economic growth, well, then that economy isn't really going to be able to grow and compete and trade with the rest of the world. So a lot of the global climate change negotiations ask, well, if we're going to mitigate climate change, then you rich countries are going to have to do something to help us out. And that's either economically or through trade or something, because it seems unfair that the United States or China are wealthy countries that emit the most carbon, but they're asking us to reduce our carbon footprint at the cost of economic development. So that's kind of a tricky thing that's going on. In your post, you didn't really talk about this seizing the global opportunity policy recommendation document. At the bottom, there was a bunch of strategies that they talk about, to mitigate the effects of carbon, like this one. Drive low carbon growth through business and investor action. All businesses should adopt short and long-term emission reduction targets. Well, I mean, is that really possible? How are you going to drive low carbon growth in a third world economy? You just want to grow. And, for a lot of third world countries, they're just interested in feeding their people in the first place. So driving innovation and, like this one, number 7, galvanize low carbon innovation. How does a third world country that doesn't have the technological expertise or the educated enough workforce going to do that? They're just going to be at the mercy of first world countries that have the very best scientists and engineers and everybody else. So some of the mitigation strategies in here in this document really are based on first world economies. And, you have to really ask yourself that question about the third world. Is the third world going to be willing to make the sacrifices that are necessary to mitigate climate change when it hampers their own economic growth? And that's a really, really tough question, especially when you put targets on there like 2020. 2020 is in 4 years. Do you really think that some of these developing economies in South America or Africa are going to give a rat's behind about reducing carbon emissions when they barely have economies that can sustain their own people and feed their own people? This is kind of a tough question. So anyway, those are my thoughts on your post. I welcome any questions or comments that you have. Just go ahead and post something in this discussion. Thanks.